Hello, welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we're here for a good time, not a long time. I'm your host, Josh Bradley, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Grizz Ulrich. What's up, Jeff?
Hi, Josh. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
I'm excited too, and I'm also excited to be joined by our other co-host, Hugo Panay. What's up, Hugo?
Hello, I'm back. I have a computer again, so
Yes.
I can.
You do. You're back from assignment. Yeah.
I am. Yeah. God.
We missed you last week.
I missed it. It was I was very annoyed with not being able to do it because it was like it's kind of movie that it's almost more fun to talk about than to watch. Which
I agree.
If you know what I mean. Like, so I was kind of.
Well, it's not exactly fun to watch. I mean, I like the movie, but it's.
That you
Killing
get
with
what
Sacred Deer is
It's
what we're
fun to
talking about,
watch
last week's
because
movie.
you know you can then talk about it with someone. That's
Yeah,
it.
it's interesting to talk about. I think it's interesting to talk about. But at the same time, I had an extra podcast. Last week I was driving around a lot because I don't want to go into the intricacies of what part-time job I'm doing, but I was driving around a lot, so I needed more podcasts. So it was fun to kind of listen in for once without
Listen
being
to your own.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting.
It's funny. Friend of the show, TJ Keeley, knew that we were doing Killing of a Sacred Deer, and so he texted me before the episode dropped and said, "How many times did the word Lynchian come up?" And I said, "Well, Hugo was on the podcast, so 0. But had he been on, I'm sure we would have talked more about David Lynch in relation to Killing of a Sacred Deer. But we didn't.
I think I might have said something.
we missed you,
along the
bud.
lines of, I think I might have said something along the lines of, "This seems like the kind of movie Hugo would love,"
Yeah,
which is basically a synonym for Lynchian. So
Yeah.
Fair. I think that's fair.
Well, it's. Go ahead, Hugo.
That's interesting that you say that because I didn't love it. Like I really liked it, and I thought like it's one of those movies that on a filmmaking level is so ingenious and interesting to just look at that I couldn't help but appreciate it. But I wasn't very. You talked a lot about how intentional the coldness and sort of the detachment of the characters
It
and the way
keeps
they
you at
talk.
arm's length a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't feel very involved by the end. So I was like, okay, like I got to the end and I was like, okay, but I'm not, maybe I'm missing. I feel like it's a movie that you watch again and you see a whole bunch of different tiny details that enhance your experience once you know what's going to happen. I know, Josh, you watched it again this time because I also saw The Lobster, and I think The Lobster is a little more, even though it's maybe even crazier, but it is a little more straightforward with what it's doing for the first watch, to me at least. And this one did keep me a little bit at arm's length, as you say, but like the filmmaking is so cool. Like those camera shots where the camera is very low on the ground and it's almost a fisheye lens and they're just walking away from it. And it feels like the camera is moving faster than the characters, but it's not. It feels like it's moving so fast. But the characters are walking towards it. It's very unsettling. I all that stuff I really enjoyed.
It's funny you say all that because like I upon first viewing I liked The Lobster more than Killing of a Sacred Deer. I saw them both like a few years ago when they came out ish, and then I watched them both in preparation for the podcast. And I actually like Killing of a Sacred Deer a lot more on second watch. And it's funny you say The Lobster is more. Did you say focused? Is that what you said it was?
No. More like in some, despite being weirder with the concept, it almost feels like it's a bit more straightforward with what it's doing. Okay. You know what I mean?
I also thought that on first viewing, but on second viewing, I actually think Killing of a Sacred Deer. The reason I liked it more than The Lobster is because I did find it more to be like, more consistent, I guess. Because The Lobster's a two halves movie. Like I like the first half a lot. Second half, I really don't care for at all in The Lobster.
Right.
But Killing of a Sacred Deer never lost the momentum that The Lobster lost to me, at least. But okay, I'm glad you're giving all your thoughts here because the first thing on the agenda for today's episode is to rank The Killing of Sacred Deer because we're not able to rank it last episode because Hugo's not around. So, first order of business, let's start with Grizz. Grizz, on your individual 50 movie list, because we're doing the ranking a little different now, you need to tell me your placement of Killing of Sacred Deer on your personal list.
We're doing it a little better now.
Yes. Yes. A little more exact.
Still a futile exercise for Josh, but
we're doing
for me,
some complex
enjoyable.
Science now. Which is
but
what we're doing.
For me, and I'm going to repeat the joke I said earlier, off mic, but I have Killing of the Sacred Deer directly above one Boogert Nights. Boogert being the full name of Boogie. For Boogie Nights.
Mr. Boogie, yeah.
Mr. Boogert Nights.
How'd you end up with Boogert?
I was thinking like Hubert, Hubert, Boogie.
Or Humphrey Bogart, but
Well, that's a last name.
Boogert.
Well, you said Mr.
Knights.
Boogert Knights.
Well, Mr. Like I'm
As
Mr.
if-
Jeff Ulrich. You're Mr. Josh
Oh.
Bradley.
Oh, so Knights is his last name.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And Boogert is his first
Boogert
name. Okay.
Knights.
Of course. I don't know.
I
what
mean,
you're
I don't know why I
getting
have
I
these
get it.
questions. It's so straightforward. Yeah. That's
In any
silly
case,
me.
So
Killing of the
obvious.
Sacred Deer, I have one spot above where I had Boogie Nights. Which
So that's your number 33.
correct.
So lower half, but pretty close to the middle.
Yes.
Hugo, how about you?
And
Where'd you have?
I
Killing of
have
the
it directly below where I had Incendie. Incendie was my number 27, and The Killing of the Sacred Deer would be my number 28. So almost
also
in the
second
top
half, but closer
Yeah.
to the middle.
Yeah.
And I'm splitting the difference with you guys. I have it just below Incendie, My Cousin Vinny, right ahead of Another Round of the Lighthouse. Smack dab at number 30 is where I have Killing the Sacred Deer. So we're pretty consistent. I have
No, I was
30.
gonna say, pretty,
Hugo's
pretty close
28.
ranking there.
And Grizz has 33. So the way the math works out, that goes to stand by. Number 34 on the list, just behind Batman: Mask of the Phantasm and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, just ahead of Chef and The Matrix and Hugo's Precious Matrix Reloaded. Killing of the Sacred Deer, number 34. All right.
Good movie.
So that's how the new math works.
Good movie.
Yeah.
I'm excited about
Yeah,
that.
good movie. Yeah. So second order of business, before we get to the main topic, which is Everybody Wants Some, I want to know what you guys have been watching this week. Let's start with Hugo. Hugo, what have you been watching?
I guess last couple of weeks, so I'll go quick.
Last couple of weeks, yes.
Yeah, because I wasn't here. I watched a bunch more Jackie Chan movies. I won't go into more detail on this, but I'm almost done with my big Jackie Chan binge. Julia got me the Project A 1 and 2 Blu-ray remaster that they did, because Project A 2 is impossible to watch anywhere.
I know that
Yes.
you're pointing up to their location on your shelves.
Sorry, yes,
but,
I am.
But it looked like you're pointing to heaven like, thanks,
Pointing
Julia.
to heaven for Julia? No, I was pointing to my Project A. Thank you, Julia. I will always remember you for this present.
R.I.P.
No, she's very okay. In fact, we were at the theatre earlier today together for a movie that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So yeah,
So
I'm
says
always
your
done-
alibi.
Yes. Don't. Is this recorded? Is that
Hugo's
sound okay?
description of his girlfriend, she's very okay.
She's very okay. She is, yeah. Yes. So basically, I have Project A Part 2, and the other movie that I want to see is The Young Master, which is another one that I can't find, but I'll figure something out. Whatever. I rewatched episodes 1 and 2 of Star Wars. I'm going to watch 3 soon because the Obi-Wan TV show is coming
So
out.
you're skipping Clone Wars? Fake fan?
I've watched Clone Wars twice over, and I don't think I will be watching all of the Clone Wars episodes because I've got stuff to do. So
I
yeah.
just meant the Clone Wars movie.
Oh, the Clone Wars movie? No, we're not doing that. But more interestingly, I think in sort of I've been watching movies like in preparation for movies that are coming out this year.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I watched Army of Darkness and Drag Me to Hell, Sam Raimi's two movies that I had not seen. Both very enjoyable, both very silly, but in a fun way. I liked Army of Darkness more just because I think it leans into the silliness and the wackiness. It's basically kind of a live action cartoon where the point
Very much
is
so.
just putting Bruce Campbell through hell, and which is great. It's always fun. Drag Me to Hell I liked slightly less, but I think still it feels like almost he wanted to do like a smaller project, like kind of a palate cleanser after going through the Spider-Man. But fun movie.
Back to his roots.
Back to Roots, yeah, for sure. And then I watched Multiverse of Madness, the new Doctor Strange movie, which I also enjoyed quite a bit. It does have some like unevenness, and I feel like the title is kind of a little bit weird because like there's not that much multiversing, and there is some madness. There is
Quite a
fair
bit of
amount of
madness.
but like they only really go to like 3 worlds
That they
and it's
spend
not
any
like,
significant amount of
yeah,
time in.
it's that we see a bunch of them, and I was like, oh yeah, I was hoping that it would be a little more propulsive in that sense, that we would see a bunch of stuff. But that being said, title aside, I really did enjoy the movie. I think it finally brought some like visual flourish to these Marvel movies that I really enjoy, but like most of the time they that that are a little flat, kind of uninventive with camera work and even just like the design of little sequences and stuff. And this one had some very cool, very Raimi, tense sequences that I really enjoyed, particularly the ones where the camera goes first person and Wanda is this kind of, well, is that a spoiler? Well, whatever. Wanda is, what everyone's seen this movie. Wanda is kind of like trying to catch the other characters that she's haunting down, and it's very much feels like it's doing some Evil Dead stuff. It's also a movie about an evil book of the damned that possesses people, so it's like
it's
very,
Evil Dead 4.
Very much. It is very much
not
Evil
Doctor
Dead
Strange
4.
Multiverse of Madness. It's Doctor Strange Evil Dead 4 is the subtitle.
It really is. Yeah, he just kind of snuck that in there, and I enjoyed that a lot.
I was going to say there are several shots in that movie in Multiverse of Madness where I was like, you know what? If you just took this one frame, this is beautiful, like beautiful artwork.
It is, yeah.
Which I can't say that about every MCU movie, and so I really did appreciate that about this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I also watched the film David Cronenberg's Crash. Have you guys seen this movie?
No,
I've not
based
seen
on
this, but
your description of it, I never will.
It entered the discourse. It entered the discourse this past week, though, because people were debating this or Titane being the better car sex movie.
Car sex movie, yes.
Why did that discourse come up?
Okay, so because Titane is a movie where a young psychopath, literally, because she murders a bunch of people, has sex with a car, literally with a car, and then kind of becomes pregnant with this car. And Crash is not so much about having sex with the car, but it's about being like it's
having
like
a threesome with the car.
Well, kind of. Not really. It's like more like it's like a group of people who become very sexually obsessed with the idea of car crashes and the stuff they get up to. It's wild. It's a very, very weird movie, but I enjoyed it.
The car crash is a bit of a cuckold.
The car crash, yes, it is. I found it to be very, very good. I enjoyed this more than Titane, for example. Although, if you listen to... There was this... Because basically it wasn't the news because Viggo Mortensen said something about Titane being derivative of Crash. But David Cronenberg himself said, well, they've been comparing our movies. She obviously has seen my movies. Julia Ducournau, who's directed Raw and Titane, she obviously has seen my movies and she's inspired by them. But look, Crash didn't win the Palme d'Or. It did get a grand jury special prize, but it didn't win the Palme d'Or. So she's doing something that I wasn't doing. So he was very positive on it. I enjoyed Crash. I think it's worth watching, but be advised, it's extremely bizarre and weird. And finally, I watched Top Gun for the first time in my life, which is a thing, and which I thought it was fine. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know why people have that much strong feelings on it either way. I don't think it was terrible. I didn't think it was great. I thought it was fine. Maybe it just kind of feels dated at this point from if you haven't seen it when you were younger in a different period of time. But
that's probably
today,
possible. Also, you're not American. You don't get you just get a red-blooded surge of adrenaline when you see these things.
I was like, this is fine.
The national pride.
Yeah. We got to the end, we watched it with Julia, and we got to the end, and we were like, that was okay, it was fine. But then we went to see today, because for some reason they were showing Top Gun Maverick yesterday and today in Italian theaters, as a preview, because it is officially releasing next week. And yes. Top Gun Maverick was absolutely brilliant. I loved it. It was one of the greatest action movies that I've seen in the last 10 years or something, right up there with movies Mission Impossible Fallout, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Mad Max, that level.
I thought you were just going to list off Tom Cruise movies.
No, I mean I could, but because he's been in many of these, but John Wick, these kinds of action movies that it is just a straightforward action movie. It doesn't have any fat. It has very clear narrative and emotional stakes, and where it's going. There's the attention to it, which I thought what was missing for me as well in Top Gun. In Top Gun, at the end we get, now there's a special mission you have to go on, but this whole movie there's a ticking clock going on, and I just found it breathtaking, like in every way. It feels like a classic, great big blockbuster Hollywood movie that we don't get as much. Very little CGI. Most of it is done on camera, and the sequences are just insane. It's ridiculous what they do with these planes, and just to be able to put it with a giant IMAX camera inside them I thought it was incredible. I thought I had a great time. You know when you just see one of those, like Terminator 2, and you see that movie and like, I just had a great time with this. And that's the feeling that it gave me. I loved it. I can't wait for you guys to see it because it's really great.
It's on my list for next weekend.
Yeah.
Yep. I actually stupidly thought it came out this current weekend, and I was super disappointed when I pulled up the AMC app and saw I couldn't buy tickets until next Tuesday.
I was because it just felt like there should have been more movies, more summer movies should have happened already. Mm-hmm. It's still just Doctor Strange.
Well, we'll get to something that came out this weekend when I get to my section. But Grizz, let's go to your section. What have you been watching recently?
So I also watched Star Wars episodes 1 and 2, and I also watched the Clone Wars. But the reason I actually watched 1 and 2 wasn't because of the upcoming Obi-Wan series, which I am very excited for. But the reason I wanted to watch episode 1 and 2 was because this is the 20th anniversary or 20th anniversary. I'm forgetting now. It's the anniversary of episode 2.
It's 20th anniversary.
20th
anniversary.
Yeah.
2002.
Thank you. Yeah. 20th anniversary of episode 2, and that is my least favorite live-action Star Wars film, but I still enjoy it, and I can't bring myself to watch just episode 2, so I watched episode 1, and I'm watching...
Gotta go in sequence.
And now I'm watching all of Star Wars in chronological order, so I'm in the middle of the Clone Wars animated series.
Fun.
So I did that. I watched a movie called Sex Appeal on Hulu. It is terrible, and I won't waste your time on that. The only reason I watched it was because there was a commercial that came up on a YouTube channel, and it was like kind of funny. So I was like, okay, I'll watch it. And then it turns out every funny thing was in the commercial. So. And then
effective advertising, though.
Very good advertising. They got me. Hook, line, and sinker.
Got your money, man. Yeah.
But then in semi-preparation for this episode today, I also watched 2 Richard Linklater movies. I finished out the Before trilogy, which I watched the first one 6 years ago, and then, or rather 4 years ago, and then I watched the second one 2 years ago, and then I watched this one. I wanted to space them out a little bit so that I could sort of get the feeling of how it was if you had watched them as they came out, because obviously that was kind of the whole impetus of those movies. It's a story told over decades. And I love that trilogy. They're so good.
Yeah. It's untouchably good. It's so good.
They're not, I would never say that they're like my favorite movies. But I don't have anything bad to say about it. I think it's because it's like a beautiful little slice of life, and then another beautiful slice of life, and another beautiful slice of life. And there's some comfort from the trilogy, but it's not one that I'm like excited that I gotta. I don't know. It's hard for me to describe why it's not like my favorite movies of all time, but they're excellent. And I don't have any complaints about them. It's just they are what they are, you know.
I almost like hold them separately from like other movies that I watch and enjoy. Like they're not ones that I rewatch a ton, but they're just like I will set aside time once every couple of years. It's funny you say that you space them out because I don't. The only times I've ever watched them, I've watched them all 3 over the course of at most 2 days. So I kind of Boyhood the Before trilogy and like watch it all in sequence as if I was watching Boyhood, basically, which is again not how they were intended to. But like I don't like when I think of my favorite movies, I kind of like set those aside as something else. They're like a treat that I return to that I give myself every once in a while. Yeah, exactly.
It almost feels more like you're just hanging out with these people and then catching up with them at a later age.
Exactly.
Like you see your friends again, but it almost feels like a completely separate thing. Yeah.
From the second movie to from the first to the second movie, that's exactly what it is you're catching up, just like them, and you're catching up with them, which makes that such a cool movie experience. And then this is, again, like they've stayed together, but now we are a friend that they haven't seen in a long time, and we're getting to see the current state of their relationship.
What'd you think of, so you just watched Before Midnight, the third one? Like,
yes.
That's the toughest watch.
That's the toughest watch, for sure.
So what'd you make of
it's interesting. When I told Hugo I was watching it, and he says, "Oh, that's a sad movie." I'm like, "Don't tell me that. I just started watching it."
I mean, it isn't sad.
But it is sad, but it doesn't end sad to me.
I think it's an open-ended ending.
It's an open-ended ending, and me being generally optimistic about life, I see this open-ended ending, and I'm thinking the future is moving up. But I also told Hugo that I would be completely unsurprised if they do another movie down the line, and it turns out that they got separated like immediately following that movie. I would not be shocked by that.
If they, I think that Julie Binoche in particular, Julie Binoche, is that who it is?
No, Julie Delpy.
Julie Delpy, excuse me. I'm mixing up my French actresses.
Yeah.
Julie Delpy has said multiple times in interviews that they're not making a fourth one, but if they are to make a fourth one, it should be released in 2022 if they're going to keep up their every 9-year track record. I'm secretly believing, or choosing to believe, that we'll get a before something at some point in 2022, but Julie Delpy says we're not.
Right.
But,
I'll tell you what I want.
She's lying.
I want Before Sunrise again. Just call it Before Sunrise again, but it's a later. It's it's them in their 70s or something like that. I think that
I feel like
be cool.
I feel like at this point we're probably not getting just the fourth one in the sense of 9 years later as they had been doing, but I also they just did a remake of that Ingmar Bergman series. What's it called? With they did it with
Alexander.
Fanny and not Fanny and Alexander. Scenes from a Marriage. Right?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
okay,
the original series that he did, it was in the 70s or something. But then in like 2000 or something, he did Saraban, which is like the follow-up movie of the same two characters, like 35, 40 years later. And I feel like if he ever goes back to these characters, it could be with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy in their 70s or something. Like, I feel in 20 years, like that would be, I think, because I don't know what else you say with, like, I don't think the difference between whatever age 40, which is where they are in Midnight, and age 49, which is where they would be in a fourth, would be. Like, the interesting thing about that trilogy to me is also that you get them at different times in their lives where there are major changes in a person's, like, character as well. Like, you get them very early 20s, in, late 20s, early 30s, and then in their 40s. And, like, there's a real progression to that. And, 10 years later, not that much changes, maybe? I don't know.
I can understand that thought process for sure.
It's interesting to me it's interesting to me how much Julie Delpy's character changes over the three movies, and how much Ethan Hawke's character kind of
stays
change.
The same. Yeah.
And that's kind of like a big source of conflict, particularly in the third movie. So, like, I'd be curious to see where they are. Just check in with them after 9 years. Even if he doesn't give me a movie, just like tell me, hey, what's going on with
a scene. Give us a short film. Give us just a
10-minute short.
10-minute short.
No cuts.
Great.
Yeah, and you do and he does the thing again where the camera just walks with him and there's no cuts. That's 10 minutes.
I love those shots.
God, it would be so good.
Well, the whole argument scene in the hotel, is that all one shot, or is it just hidden cuts?
No, I don't think so.
Hidden cuts? I mean, I guess...
I don't remember. It's been a minute.
Like, there's some sequences, there's some parts in that where you see the camera just pan from him sitting in one room to her sitting in the other, and I can tell that is either all one shot or they're doing a hidden cut somewhere.
They're definitely doing hidden cuts, but, like, a lot of those movies are shot like that, and I think in the first one it was just a budget thing, like such a limited budget that they had to figure out how to make this work, and then by the second one it kind of became a feature, and yeah, I love those movies. I think, but we'll
that wasn't the only
about
Richard
other
Linklater
movies.
Yeah. That wasn't the only other that I watched in preparation, because it was also suggested to me. I was bemoaning the lack of movies about Houston that are made. There's certainly not many movies made in Houston, let alone made about Houston.
It's hot, man.
And that's that's something that I complain about, because obviously Josh lives in L.A. 1/3 of movies take place in LA, I swear. And then I have, friends who live in New York, and another third of the movies take place in New York. And it's just, Houston's the 4th largest city in the country, and we probably make up, less than 0.5% of movies. It's, but that is not the case in Richard Linklater's filmography, thanks to a new movie that appeared on Netflix, Apollo 10.5, which was the other movie I watched in preparation for this. And it is just a beautiful love letter to Houston. And
yes.
I loved everything about that. The story of the movie itself is not one of my favorites of his, but you can really just tell that he loves this city, and or loved what the city was. It's not so much. It's very nostalgic, and what's crazy is how much of his nostalgia was still things that I'm nostalgic about now, because the Astrodome was still my stadium when I was a kid. Astroworld was still my amusement park when I was a kid. So much of it translated. It touched me.
What's funny is you said the story was your favorite. I like how the story is set up in the first 5 minutes. Then they literally just hit pause on the story. And you don't come back for like 45 minutes. So like basically half the movie, the first half of the movie has nothing to do with that story that you don't care much for. That I don't really care much for either, honestly. And it's just 45 minutes of just like, this is what life was like growing up one of 6 kids in Houston in 1969. And I adore that so much.
Yeah.
Like, I mentioned this last week or last time we recorded that I watched this as well, and I adored this movie. Yeah, so good.
And but that was what I've been watching recently, and you know, I know we spent a lot of time talking about Richard Linklater stuff, and that doesn't. I don't feel bad about that, because that's what we're going to be talking about in this podcast. But Josh, what did you watch?
He'll come up, yeah. But first, let me cover what I've been doing. I also saw. I forgot to put this down, but I watched Army of Darkness like Hugo did, in preparation for Multiverse of Madness, which I'm glad, because Multiverse of Madness is as much a sequel to Army of Darkness as it is a sequel to Doctor Strange, I feel like.
Absolutely.
You know, everyone talks about like the cameos in all these Marvel movies, including this one. And it's funny, is like I kind of like could not have given less of a shit about the cameos in this movie, but as soon as the movie went to Evil Dead mode, I just started squealing like a girl. I was so excited.
I mean, I was excited about one cameo that didn't have anything to do with Marvel. So
Bruce Campbell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yes. Let's do it.
Yeah. I was a sucker for the Raimi stuff. Especially because like not only is it like you said, Hugo, like there's demons and a Book of the Dead and a Book of Life, and like it's extremely Evil Dead like. But also like not to spoil anything, but the ending scene, the villain of the movie and how the villain meets their demise is not only emotionally very much like Spider-Man 2, but there's a lot of visual signifiers that match what happens to the villain at the end of Spider-Man 2. I'm like, oh yeah, Sam Raimi, man, he's doing the thing.
He knows what he's doing.
Even structurally, the movie is kind of, you know how Spider-Man 2 does that thing where we get we get a few scenes with Spider-Man, and then we get a few scenes with Doc Ock, and then we get a few scenes with Spider-Man, and then we get a few scenes with Doc Ock, and then they meet kind of at various points throughout the story, and then at the end. And kind of this movie is kind of structured the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And kind of the villain arc, like the villain emotional arc, is also quite similar. There's something that happens, and then they go through a similar kind of journey by the end.
Yes. So yeah, Multiverse of Madness liked it a lot more than Doctor Strange, which left me fairly cold. This one I liked a lot more. Speaking of leaving me cold, I rewatched Joker, a movie called Joker, this week for the first time since theaters.
The Joker!
Grizz is shaking his head. Why are you shaking your head, Grizz?
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan.
Not a fan of Joker.
So again, I watched it for the first time since theaters, and it was good. It was an illuminating watch for me, because I'm the kind of person who, particularly in the last few years, I feel like I am not good about like assessing my feelings appropriately on first viewings. I'm like watching for so much stuff that usually takes 2 viewings to really decide how I feel about something. But this was an illuminating rewatch, because when I walked out of the theater in September of 2019, I said, I don't think I like that very much. And then I watched it this week, and yeah, I don't like that very much. So it just kind of confirmed what I already knew, that I don't like that very much. So that's Joker. It's not very good.
I'm just going to give some brief feelings on that movie. I went and looked up my rating. I actually gave it 7 out of 10, or 3.5 stars.
That's probably what I gave it to. Yeah,
and like it's good, but like it didn't have to be a DC movie. In fact, I think making it a DC movie devalues its message, and I think all the people love it for all the wrong reasons, and it's an infuriating movie.
Like, I like the craft a lot. I like the production design and the cinematography and the music, and Joaquin Phoenix is great, but like the script is I can't remember who to attribute this to, but someone recently I heard someone say that X is a smart movie for dumb people, and that's what Joker is. It's a smart movie for dumb people. It's like, it's just like, I don't know, man. It's really shallow to me, but like it's trying to like aspire to not be shallow, but it's just so surface level, like all the supposedly deep stuff in it, and I don't know, I just really don't care for it very much.
To me, it's very much another movie inspired by sort of Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, the two Scorsese films, but it fails to kind of build on that, and it just takes the surface level like sort of story structure and aesthetics of it, but doesn't really add anything. Like, I don't know if you, like, just watch You Were Never Really Here. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie.
Great movie.
It's Lynn Ramsey, kind of a similar vibe, but I think it does a Taxi Driver / King of Comedy much better than this.
Taxi Driver is Legos. Joker is Duplo.
Yeah. Sure.
I don't know what that is, but okay.
They're the giant Legos for babies.
Oh, okay. All right, heard it here first. Grizz says that if you like Joker, you're a baby. That's what Grizz just said.
You are a child.
Go enjoy your lunch at a high chair. Don't poopy too much in your diaper. Yeah, your Lunchables. That's Grizz saying that. So yeah, that's Joker.
And normally Josh puts words in my mouth, and I disagree with what he's doing, but no, I'm fine with that. You're a baby.
Grizz just said you have a big poopy diaper if you like the movie Joker. That's exactly what he just said. And lastly, Grizz, you mentioned stuff that's not coming out in theaters. One movie was released in theaters that I saw called Men. Alex Garland's Men, and I saw it last night. And there's a lot of very, very upsetting things in the movie Men.
It doesn't look like a movie for me at all.
It's not a movie for Grizz. I was actually thinking about that as I was watching. Well, I had two thoughts as I was watching it. Number one, I thought Grizz would hate this. And number two, I thought, what can I watch after this as a palate cleanser to like put me in a better mood after I watch this movie? I was like actively thinking that as I was watching. I'm like, what can I put on when I get home?
Jesus, yeah.
It's rough. It's good. It's very good. Or, I don't know. I think it's good. It's hard to... It invites a lot of interpretation. It invites a lot of questions.
If you're a fan of Alex Garland, will you still enjoy it?
I mean, I'm a big fan of Alex Garland, and I certainly enjoyed it. It's just more opaque, I think. I mean, Annihilation's pretty opaque, but this is more so. Again, there's stuff in... Like, the whole last half hour is bonkers, and a lot of... Again, very, very upsetting imagery, but also like extremely compelling imagery where like, okay, he's certainly going for some kind of metaphor here. I just don't really know what that is.
Is it?
So I
have a question. Is it basically just like The Nutty Professor, except it's a horror movie, with that one guy playing every character?
It's not The Nutty Professor, but a horror movie. No, Rory Kinnear is not doing a Norbit situation here.
That's sad.
Rory Kinnear does play multiple characters. Again, open to interpretation and analysis. Like it's not commented upon, but the fact that every man in the movie is played by the same person, same face, different body. You can draw there's several conclusions you can draw from that creative choice, but the movie lets you draw that. It doesn't really tell you what to think.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the movies like that, where again, like there's some extremely provocative decisions and imagery that again will probably get a reaction out of you, but it doesn't. And it like again, it is suggesting that there's a larger message or larger point being made here, but it doesn't hold your hand, letting you arrive to that point. Lets you come to it yourself. Which I need to think about the movie a lot more before I say much about it, I guess. But I saw Men.
Nice.
Good movie. Yeah. Man, we're dragging along. We're 34 minutes in.
Let's dive in, guys, because I'm actually very excited to talk about our film to remember this week.
We saw a lot of recent movies, that happens.
That's true. Well, our film to remember this week, as alluded by Grizz in his Richard Linklater watching, is a movie called Everybody Wants Some. This was my pick. I saw this movie in theaters, and I was an enormous fan, and I feel like it just disappeared from the public consciousness after it left theaters. So that's why I wanted to bring it up and talk about it with you guys. Jump right into the boilerplate. It was released on March 30th, 2016 on 5 screens, so very limited release. And it slowly expanded to more screens over the subsequent weeks, but it never played on more than 454 screens. And for reference here, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is currently playing on 4,500 screens, and even Downton Abbey: A New Era is currently playing on 3,800 screens. And Everybody Wants Some never played on more than 454, which is an extremely limited release.
Very limited, yeah.
Yes. I'm not sure if 500 or 1,000 is the threshold to be, quote, limited release, but it didn't hit either one, so it doesn't matter.
I think it's kind of up to...
I think it's a nebulous definition. Yeah. It certainly never went wide. I don't know what, wide release is considered. Maybe it's 2,000 screens. I don't know.
Probably.
So it only played for 7 weeks, and it made $3.4 million domestic, $1.2 million international, for a worldwide gross of $4.6 million, against a budget of $10 million, which is not very good. Probably a new recurring theme on this show is movies that did not make back their budget at the box office, because we are going to kind of pivot to more under the radar movies that
films you should remember that you clearly don't.
Yes. But just for a point of comparison, so again, Everybody Wants Some played 7 weeks, made $4.6 million against a budget of 10. People compare this to Dazed and Confused, which was Richard Linklater's kind of cult hit from 1993 as a spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused. So just to give a point of comparison for the Dazed and Confused box office numbers, that only played for 3 weeks in theaters in 1993 and never played on more than 214 screens and only made $8 million against a budget of $6.9 million. So that at least made back its money and made a little bit more than Everybody Wants Some. And
it's become a cult classic.
That was a video hit. That was a blockbuster hit. That was a, kids in high school and college discovering it after theaters kind of hit, word of mouth thing. But that kind of post theater success doesn't really happen as much anymore, because just the aftermarket for movies is a lot different than it was in 1993, which is a big shame, because I feel like Everybody Wants Some could have in another time found a new life after theaters the way that Dazed and Confused did, but I don't think there's the mechanisms anymore for that to happen. I hope so. I mean, here we are 6 years out, and no one knows this movie.
I don't know how views on a streaming service benefit a movie.
I mean, it depends. If you go to Netflix and look at their top 10, the top 10 on Netflix is a really strange, interesting document, because it's yeah, you'll find whatever new reality show is just dropped by Netflix. That usually fills out 2 or 3 slots in the top 10. But a lot of times it's the most random cable broadcast TNT movies. I think a couple weeks ago, U.S. Marshals from 1998, starring Tommy Lee Jones, the sequel to The Fugitive, was number 2 most watched on Netflix. Why?
Why not?
Yeah, so I have no idea what does or doesn't make a hit on streaming. I doubt people who run streaming services know what does or doesn't make a hit on streaming, because it's pretty baffling.
I would say they most certainly do not know, because of the economics that we're seeing with them. But that's another point.
Yes. So Everybody Wants Some did not make much money at the box office. However, I want to ask you guys, the week that it opened in 2016. So it technically opened on a Wednesday, March 30th. So the weekend beginning Friday, April 1st, 2016, what do you think was number 1 at the box office? April 1st, 2016. I have a hint for you if you want to get a hint.
Well, yes.
I'll need a hint, because
we'll need a hint. Because when I play the box office game, I get at least the starring actor of the movie before I guess.
Well, I can give you that also. But so I'm kind of going off the top of the head here. But as I remember, so I didn't verify this, but as I remember, this movie that was number 1 was originally supposed to be a May release, but they moved it to March because they didn't want to compete with Captain America: Civil War, which came out in May of 16. So this was moved to March of 16. But it was a very big movie.
A very big movie.
And maybe the fact that it was avoiding Captain America: Civil War is a hint to what kind of movie this was.
Was this Batman versus Superman, or
this was Batman versus Superman: The Dawn of Justice.
Yeah.
Yes, in its second week, April 1st, where it made $51 million, bring its gross up to $260 million. That's
why did you say that name?
A lot of money for a movie that's not very good, that nobody seems to really like.
That's all right.
Oh,
that's
fine. Actually, you will find that there are many people on the internet who really swear by this movie, and they will, program
He's not
bots to
joking.
vote at the Oscars about what the favorite movie moments of the year were. But
That has nothing to do with this movie, though. That has to
Fair
do
enough.
with the next version of the movie.
that is true.
Yes.
That is true.
I don't think. I mean, yeah. Obviously, a lot of people online have very strong opinions on Justice League. I don't really see those many people coming out of the woodwork to defend Batman v
there are a
Superman.
It might
few,
just
but I feel like
be-
there's less.
Hugo and I are fans of this YouTube channel, Kind of Funny, and the main guy on there, Greg Miller, is the biggest diehard Superman fan, and so he campaigned for years, sold merch that said Batman versus Superman was a good movie. You know,
But, like-
stuff like that. So like we might be blinded a little bit by.
But
our
I feel like
community.
I feel like he was still being ironic. Like there's people
Is he
on the
doing a
internet
bit?
who are like
Like,
very.
That sounds like
He's
a bit.
kind of doing a
It's
bit.
kind
like
of a
he's,
bit.
He's
Like,
half
I
doing
think
a bit.
He
at
enjoys the
least.
movie. Like he knows it's not
Yeah.
like a legitimately good movie, but he enjoys
Yeah.
it, and he enjoys it's the nonsense of it. You know.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other thing altogether.
Anyway, that's a movie that existed.
Let's divert back to Everybody Wants Some, which already lost to Batman vs Superman at the box office. Now it's losing again on its own podcast episode. Let's give it the attention it deserves. So, as I said, it was kind of like a thought. It kind of sold. Linklater kind of sold it as a spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused, but none of the same characters. Dazed and Confused was like was it a weekend or a day in the life of like these high school
week.
kids in
It's a
Texas? A week.
Yeah.
And it took place in the 70s.
70s, yeah. Late 70s, I
70s.
think. Yeah.
Late 70s. And this is a weekend in the life of a college baseball team in 1980. So you can kind of see the parallels there.
Mm-hmm.
And he also described it as like he kind of cheekily called it like a continuation of the movie Boyhood, which was the movie that came out just before this in 2014. Reason being, Boyhood ends with a young man arriving to college, and then this movie begins with a young man arriving to college. Two very different guys, but that's kind of like the link between his two consecutive movies, Boyhood and Everybody Wants Some. And that also, by the way, that's also why I saw this in theaters and why I sought this out, because as I've already said, it made no money at the box office, but I was there opening weekend because I was Boyhood was like a life-changing movie for me. I was obsessed with it, and it yeah, I mean, it was just a life-changing movie. So like I immediately was like,
the concept of Boyhood for me is the kind of like I wish more directors would try to make movies like that, because what a bold thing to do, to pick a star that you don't know what kind of actor he's going to be as he gets older. You don't know what kind of person he's going to be as he gets older, but you're going to set everything is on the shoulders of this child growing up and shooting that. That's such a cool idea. Sorry.
sounds like you're not as... The fact that you're harping on the idea makes me think you're not as much of a fan of the execution of the movie itself.
I again, it's kind of like the Before trilogy for me, where I love the experience of that movie, but it's, again, not something that I go back to regularly. Like, it's just something I'm happy that I enjoyed it that one time, but it's not that thing it's not something I need to go back to.
I do. I return to it
And that's
fairly often. It's a really special movie to me. Linklater kind of like pitched this as a Dazed Confused and Boyhood kind of like not rolled into one, you know what I mean? And it's funny going back and like I was reading like some Hollywood Reporter and Deadline articles like from before the movie came out, and like the announcement that he was working on this happened like as Boyhood was still in theaters, and so this is the Hollywood Reporter in 2014. I'm quoting now. Linklater wants to concentrate on That's What I'm Talking About, which was the original title for the movie. That's What I'm Talking About. A 1980s university set project that is akin to his cult hit Dazed Confused, which was set in the 70s and set in high school. The project, which is based on Linklater's life, follows freshmen as they navigate through the first year of college life while trying to make the baseball team. Which is funny to like hear that 2 years before the movie came out, back when it was still like about the whole freshman year of college, not about the first weekend. And it had a different title and that kind of stuff. It always amused me to like read reporting on movies like long before the movie comes out, and then like, because we're in the future, we know what did or didn't happen. Linklater said he wrote the first draft in 2005, and as I just said, it originally covered the entire first year of college, and the screenplay was 180 pages, which would be like a 3-hour movie or so. And he said it got too sprawling, so he cut it down and focused on just the first weekend. And he said, quote, "Now it's a college movie with no college. When I remember college, I remember the camaraderie." So he made a movie about camaraderie as opposed to about like actually college classes, which I think works. And so originally it was set up at Paramount, but apparently they were reluctant to give him the budget that he wanted, which is why it kind of like sat around for so long. And then Megan Ellison read the script and liked it. So Megan Ellison's company, Annapurna, stepped in and partnered with Paramount and coughed up the dough. And just a big shout out to Megan Ellison, who I don't know if you guys are familiar with her, but she's Larry Ellison's daughter. So she's just takes her billionaire father's money and funds projects for very interesting filmmakers. And, you know, because of her, we got like, you know, her and Zero Dark 30 and Everybody Wants Some. It's great. Yeah. What's up, Grizz?
I did want to correct something. I think it was actually just one day for Dazed and Confused.
Okay. Thank you for the correction.
It was bothering me if I didn't say something. I think it was just one day. I think it was the last day of school.
Yeah, that's. I think that's right. Yeah. So Everybody Wants Some. Brief plot summary. So as we kind of alluded, it's just the first weekend of college for a college baseball team. We follow this guy named Jake as he arrives on campus at Texas State University.
Texas State University.
Which is fictional, right? Or is that real?
There is a Texas State. I don't believe
it's not this though.
I don't believe it's
right?
this university because Texas State's mascot is the Bobcats. The mascot here is the Cherokees. Now, granted, they could have changed their mascot in the intervening years, so it's possible. But yeah, Texas State's a real school.
Yes. Okay. So Jake arrives to the baseball house the Thursday before classes start, and the whole movie is him like meeting his team and getting ingratiated into college life, meeting a few girls, partying a lot, and that's kind of it. They hang out at the baseball house for 90 minutes. Yeah. And that's the plot. So
it's really like 3 parties and a few day scenes, and that's the movie.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. So Hugo, what'd you think of the movie? Let's start with you and your general thoughts.
This is another movie that I kind of started with different. I think I had different expectations for it. I thought it would be more of a college like film, and it ends up being really not about college at all. Other than living in college and that first weekend, but there's no class, there's no like college drama. I thought it would be more of a traditional kind of college movie in that sense, and it kind of surprised me in that way. I had a really good time with this. I think where I enjoyed it a lot was that it kind of started with the types of characters that I generally wouldn't care for. Like, it's kind of the jocks baseball teams, and they're kind of assholes, and they basically kind of what they're all just trying to do is to get some, which is the title of the movie. But I think the smart move is that they all start out in a stereotype, and the movie kind of shows you how all those stereotypes blend in with each other, really. Like, there's the scene where they go to the punk show, and they're like, "Oh, we're punk for a night," and then they end up interacting with the performing arts kids, and they kind of fit in anyway in some weird way. It's not there isn't that strict kind of division that you might see in a lot of movies.
I will be talking about that later on. We'll definitely be talking about that kind of stuff later on. Yeah.
Which I think is where the movie got me. I think I started out being annoyed by these characters, and by the end I was like, well, maybe they're not so terrible. Like, they're kind of dicks sometimes, but like they're just 20 years old and in the 80s and very horny. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's like
God love them.
Yeah, they'll get better. They're not bad people is what I ended up feeling. And also I think the movie's just charming, very funny.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know, very much like Before Sunrise and Sunset, he's probably the best at just making you, in just a few quick scenes, just making you fall in love with a young couple that is falling in love. Like, you're not even necessarily like falling in love, like, for me, I'm not even necessarily falling in love with the female character or having a crush on her. It's just like he creates this dynamic between the love interests that you feel involved in. Like, you want them to be together, and you don't know how it's going to go. They'll probably break up. They just met in the first weekend of college. It doesn't matter, but it's like he gives you that feeling of falling in love that I don't know how he does it, but it's really
You're talking about
remarkable.
You're talking about Jake and Beverly, right?
Yes.
Blake Jenner and Zoe Deutsch.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's extremely charming.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Grizz, general thoughts on the movie. What do you think?
So, in general, I felt a lot of the same things Hugo did, but my main takeaway, and this was my letterboxd review of it as well, is that it was amazing to me how this movie can be simultaneously nothing like my college experience and still feel exactly like my college experience.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
And because it really does capture the spirit of all of my college experience except for class, right? And I think that's why it's such a cool thing that they focused on this. I was in the Glee Club in college, which is a men's choir, obviously nothing like a baseball team, but it is an all men's organization, so there's some similarity there. And guys are kind of dicks to each other, there's some similarity there, but also they're all really, a lot of them are just real sweethearts, deep down. So I don't know. We're completely different walks of life, but I felt like, oh yeah, this guy has experienced a lot of what I remember from my time in college. And I was kind of curious because Josh and I went to the same school, if he kind of felt the same way, because our dorm is not unlike this as well, where it's all guys hanging out. A lot of them, you're kind of good-natured ribbing and stuff like that. The seniors giving life lessons to the freshmen, acting like they know a lot when in reality they don't really know that much more.
Anything, yeah.
But what do you think, Josh?
No, I agree. Yeah. So where Grizz and I went to school, Notre Dame. I mean, every school has like a freshman orientation, I feel like. But we have like a pretty distinct frosh show weekend where you spend 4 days just like getting to know the people in your dorm, not unlike how before classes start, this movie takes 4 days to just get to know your baseball teammates. And I see some overlap and some similarities, and I guess that makes, because you were 2 years ahead of me, so you were one of like the older seasoned guys in the dorm that like you already had like a respected reputation, and like people knew who you were and everything when I arrived on campus. So you were, I don't know, maybe you were Glenn Powell and I was Blake Jenner when we arrived.
I'm Glenn Powell? That is the nicest thing Josh has ever said to me.
Okay. But okay, a few things that you mentioned so you mentioned how it was not the same specifics of your college experience, but kind of just felt like it was your college experience.
That's the whole feeling of it.
So he's got Linklater, all of his movies have real specificity, and I want to talk about that later. That's later in the outline. So we'll come back to that. But before that, I want to talk about the cast, because I just mentioned Glenn Powell, and your eyes lit up when I compared you to Glenn Powell. So this cast at the time was mostly newcomers that hadn't been in anything before, or not like a major movie at least. Like he basically plucked people from various teen network TV shows. So like Blake Jenner, who plays Jake Bradford, the main character, he was on Glee. Tyler Hoechlin, who plays Mac, what's his name on this? Mac something, I don't know.
McReynolds?
Tyler Hoechlin.
McReynolds.
McReynolds, thank you. Thank you. Tyler Hoechlin. He was on Teen Wolf on MTV. Zoe Deutsch was on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. She was also on a short-lived CW show called Ringer. And Glenn Powell had been on Screamy Queens. And I love everyone in this cast, like, so much. And even though I hadn't seen them in anything, like, from here on out, I'm just perpetually rooting for all of them to do well. And, like, Tyler Hoechlin, shortly after this, was cast to play Superman on Supergirl, and then on another CW show that, like, I don't watch those shows, but, like, I'm just super excited for him. He's Superman. Like, that's great. And, like, Zoe Deutsch has gone on to some good stuff since then. And, but Glenn Powell has become, like, a big star. And it's funny we're talking about this movie the week before Top Gun Maverick comes out, right? Because one of the big reasons I was excited for Top Gun Maverick is Glenn Powell. I'm like, fuck yeah, Glenn Powell's in something. All right, yeah.
I didn't know that, and I saw Top Gun Maverick today, and I was like, oh, it's the guy from Everybody Wants Some. I didn't even know his name. I was like, oh, shit. And I was like, he plays the same character. It's great. It's like, he basically plays the same character.
Because I love his character.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like, even though Blake Jenner, Jake Bradford is the main character, this is the Glenn Powell show for me.
I agree.
Glenn Powell's the star of this movie so much.
He's so fun.
Yes. Glenn Powell plays Finn, and he's, I guess, like the wisecracking. Just his smile is freaking electric. And like every time Glenn Powell's on screen, I'm having a good time. And so I also want to pitch this real quick. So we all agree Glenn Powell's great in this, and I like Zoe Deutsch in this a lot too. I don't know how you guys feel, but 2 years after Everybody Wants Some, there was a movie on Netflix called Set It Up, and it's just a Netflix original romantic comedy starring Zoe Deutch and Glenn Powell. And you're already in already, but it's just about their two assistants to like Hollywood executive types who their lives are, they're assistants, so their lives are kind of run by the people they work for, and so to ease their own lives, they set up their bosses on dates with each other, basically, and then obviously the assistants of the bosses end up falling in love with themselves. It's an extremely, extremely charming movie, as you could imagine, because it's Glenn Powell and Zoe Deutch, but big recommend. If you liked this, you'll like that too. What's up, Grizz?
Well, as long as we're all hyped on Glenn Powell right now.
We are.
We
are hyped on Glenn Powell.
He is in Apollo 10.5 with Richard
Yes, he is.
Linklater directing, and I love to see that because Richard Linklater has a habit of using actors over and over again, but not all of them, but like he'll pick a select few. And so I was just happy that he's already been in a second Linklater movie because I could just feel it. He's going to be in another one,
And what's funny is in 2016, so a few months after Everybody Wants Them came out, he played an astronaut in Hidden Figures. He was John Glenn in Hidden Figures, yeah. Which is a movie I haven't really thought much of in the last 6 years.
I enjoyed it.
I liked it at the time. Yeah,
very good.
Yeah.
And he was a good John Glenn too. For that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny to think about. They shot Top Gun Maverick mostly in like 2019. I think they shot that like 3 years ago. Yeah. So it was supposed to come out in like the fall of 19. They pushed it back to spring of 20 so they could shoot more fighter jet, like second unit stuff on the fighter jets. And then it got pushed for COVID. So it's like, it's basically coming out like 3 or 4 years after they shot it. And like, I feel like Glenn Powell was about to pop off. And now like his pop off has been kind of delayed. But I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm pretty confident that if any of the young newcomers are going to pop off, it's going to be Glenn Powell.
He's really good in it, is what I'll say. He plays a similar character, but
you'll love to hear it.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like I said, I'm just rooting for everybody in this cast. But like the fact that I feel like Glenn Powell is probably on the cusp more than anybody else is, I just love everybody in this. And so speaking of which, Wyatt Russell. Speaking of popping off, I feel like if anybody who's had a big career post Everybody Wants Them, it's probably Wyatt Russell, who's now
evil Captain America.
I didn't watch the show.
He's not evil Captain America.
Well,
he's Captain America that makes a lot of mistakes, like actual America.
Yeah, he's more like kind of more right wing.
He plays John Walker, who in the comics is U.S. agent, is his character in the comics.
And he's in Captain America Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where he plays John Walker again, and who becomes Captain America after the circumstances of Endgame.
Mm-hmm. He was also in The Woman in the Window, which was just a mind-bogglingly bad movie, given the talent involved. That was on Netflix last year. I just kind of dumped that and then never spoke of it again. But he's in that. Do you know who Wyatt Russell's parents are?
I believe that it's Kurt Russell is his dad. And Kurt Russell's wife, who is also super famous, and her name's escaping me right now. Help me out, Josh.
Goldie Hawn.
Goldie Hawn.
Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn are Wyatt Russell's parents. So that segues nicely. I was watching a behind-the-scenes thing on the Blu-ray for Everybody Wants Some, and I learned that all of the cast, when they were submitting their audition tapes, a portion of their audition tape had to be them filming themselves playing baseball to make sure that they could be passable on camera, throwing a ball and swinging a bat and everything. And Wyatt Russell in the interview, in the talking heads, mentioned the fact that my grandpa played professional baseball, my dad played professional baseball, and I was like, record scratch, hold the phone. Your dad? I know who your dad is. Your dad did not play professional baseball. I looked it up.
He did.
Kurt Russell was a minor league ball player for the Yankees in the 70s before he became an actor. I'm like, holy shit, could this guy be cooler? Yeah.
That's
Kurt Russell's a pro ball player, and Wyatt Russell apparently, he's got good form at least. But so I wanted to ask you guys. Well, I wanted to ask you guys, when you're watching a sports movie, and it can be this movie or any sports movie, does their form, if it's bad, does it distract you? Do they have to how much does that matter to you? And we'll start with Grizz.
Yes, it can distract you. It certainly depends on how the sports sequences are being shot. For example, in football movies, you'll frequently see when they're playing, it's basically just them snapping the football and then cut to someone getting nailed, right?
Yeah.
Because that way they don't actually have to show you the game being played, and they can, just take whatever big hit they got and put it there, and they can piece things together without it having to actually make sense.
They cut around it.
Of a game. They cut around the game.
They cut around it, yeah.
So that they do that to avoid situations where their actors could get hurt or look like they don't know what they're doing. So
Yeah. Well, part of the reason I ask is I listen to a lot of Ringer podcasts, and Bill Simmons, the head guy at the Ringer, he's like notorious for being hard on sports movies and like how realistic the sports looks. And he like The Natural, for example, he talks about this a lot. He says that at the end of The Natural ends with Robert Redford playing catch with his son. And according to Bill Simmons, the son's throwing motion is so bad it almost ruins the entire movie just for like 10 seconds of showing this kid playing catch with his dad. And he's like, could you not find a kid who could actually throw a baseball?
Well, his dad was the natural. The son's
his
not
dad
the
was the natural. Well, the natural should be able to teach at least how to throw a baseball. And it's funny that Bill Simmons has like a running tally of like movies that like where clearly a guy can or can't play. Like for example, Hugo, you're listening to Blank Check right now. So For the Love of the Game, the Sam Raimi movie For the Love of the Game. Kevin Costner pitches a perfect game. That's the movie. Apparently they cut around John C. Reilly a lot. John C. Reilly's the catcher, and they cut around him so much because apparently John C. Reilly can't throw a baseball. So
right,
sorry, John C.
Yeah,
but
it's
Hugo.
It is kind
this
of
movie or any movie. Yeah, what's your
okay for this
kind of thing?
For this movie, not knowing that much about baseball, other than having like seen a few highlights or stuff like that. I know the very, very, very basic rules, but I don't understand the sport that much. But they seemed fine. Like especially what's his name, the guy who at one point does like just. Does a home run. I can't remember his name.
McReynolds.
Tyler Hoechlin? Yeah, McReynolds.
Yeah, he. I mean, I thought he specifically looked really good. I don't know.
So I'm glad you brought him up because he actually played college baseball at Arizona State,
Right.
which is a really good baseball program. He actually went to the
Well,
College
there you
World
go.
Series with them, and then he played at UC Irvine. He transferred to UC Irvine, and like he was
That makes
debating
sense.
trying to go to the majors or become an actor, and he went with acting instead. But yeah, he played college baseball at an elite university, and he does have the sweetest looking swing in this movie.
It looks
and
good.
It brings
Yeah.
me a lot of satisfaction. Yes.
But like it is kind of like I have seen some movies where like especially there might be like a basketball scene. There's a sport that I understand where you see somebody throw a basketball really poorly and with terrible form, and then the movie will just cut to a ball falling down in the net, and that's just every time that's terrible. Which is like made me think of like the movie He Got Game with Denzel, who plays Ray Allen's dad. And that movie was all right with that because like there was scenes where the camera would be on the basket and you could see Denzel actually, shooting some good jump shots, and it did kind of add to the experience. But I do think that like to some extent it has to look at least a little bit good because otherwise it's just kind of weird.
What's up,
I
Grizz?
did want to say that for this movie, I don't think it was necessary.
No, for this movie, they could have gotten away with not showing the baseball, but the fact that they did, and had people who could look convincing, I think.
I think
so.
They what they did, at least this was my what I noticed, was that the focus when they were actually practicing, the focus was on the pitchers, and the focus was on McReynolds hitting. And I think that was smart because a pitcher can have a really weird windup and look goofy and still be a very good pitcher. And baseball fans, baseball, you're going to tell me you've never seen a submarine arm.
That's not goofy form, though.
That's goofy form. You come over the top. That's how you.
That's not a goofy windup. That's not a windup. A submarine pitch is not part of the windup.
Okay, what about Hideo Nomo? He had
That's goofy, but he was one of a kind.
I'll play
point is
the
that we've
audience
seen
here
it.
and just say that I'm completely lost. I don't know.
We've seen
But
it.
also,
We've seen
but
some
also,
goofy
like
windups.
a goofy windup is one thing, but you need to have like a proper release point and a proper throwing motion. I need to believe that you are throwing the ball 80 plus miles an hour. And if you have a goofy
But they were
release
doing
point or
batting
windup, then
practice.
I'm not going to believe that. They're still hitting 80 in batting practice. I promise you. In fact, Jay Niles claims he's hitting 95.
I mean, that's
trying.
probably true in college and in the professionals. But my point was that like you can get away. My feeling on it was that as you can get away with a pitcher that looks a little weird because the pitchers do all have different windups, different releases, and so like I don't know. Mentally, I can make the justification that even if the pitcher didn't look like a professional pitcher, that okay, fine, it works for the movie. But if you're like just outright bad at baseball and you can't field a ground ball, you can't show a second baseman not being able to field a ground ball. So,
which is funny you say that because the guy who plays the second baseman, whose name escapes me right now, the black gentleman, he is not very good at baseball per the behind the scenes thing and him forming his audition tape, and you don't see him play any baseball at all in this movie. I don't believe he shows up at all in the practice scenes. So.
J. Quentin Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we see Tyler Hoechlin swing, we see Blake Jenner pitch, we see Wyatt Russell pitch, and we see Jay Niles pitch. So we really only see like really 4 players in their form, and they're all passable. I don't think that Charlie Willoughby's thrown very hard. Wyatt Russell, considering his dad was a professional athlete, I feel like he needs to have better form. So okay, so my threshold
chill release for any pitcher ever.
My threshold for this, when I watch this kind of thing, is they need to be at least as good as I would be doing the same thing.
Fair,
which I think is not a very high threshold. I mean, I think I'm a generally athletic person, but like I also like am not a pro athlete. I do other things, but I still can swing a bat, throw a ball, shoot a basket. So like actors, even though they're not pro athletes, they need to be at least as good as me. You know, and that's my threshold. And if they're worse than me, I'm like, hey, I could do better than that. That's ridiculous.
I felt good about Wyatt Russell's. I felt good about Wyatt Russell's pitching motion not because it was good pitching, but because his pitching motion felt like how Willoughby would throw. Because he's a pothead,
yes,
very like, here you go.
Who turns out
grew up on 2 rivers. He's got river lungs. Okay, so that brings me to the specificity. So like they got the baseball stuff enough right. So like, you know, that's like a detail that they needed to get right, and they got it well enough right for me. But like there is a lot of details in this movie. Not only is it about like, you know, a baseball team, which has its own kind of specifics to it, but it's also a period piece and about college. So there's a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, specificity here. And I think that Linklater is really good about, you know, because a lot of his movies are set in a specific time and place, that like specificity is like a big part of his charm. Apollo 10.5, certainly the specificity there is a big part of the charm of that movie. So I just wanted to ask, you know, any bits of specificity jump out to you? I have a few of my own that I can go first, or if you guys have anything. Great. Okay, I'll kick us off. So Linklater mentioned in one of the quotes early on the camaraderie of college. And I think that I played baseball through high school, so I was never on a college team, but I was a level below this. And like the camaraderie of the teammates, but also the competitiveness between them, rang so true to me. And they make a big point actually in the movie to like even comment on the competitiveness, that like to play a sport at this level, you kind of have to be a little bit psycho and kind of have to be like obsessed with winning and losing. And like that comes down to like the pettiness in their small like competitions they have with each other in the house. Like Mick, I already forget his name again. McReynolds. McReynolds freaks out when he loses ping pong to Jake and like slaps himself multiple times. Like it's kind of like intense. And then Nesbitt plays Knuckles with the freshman and loses Knuckles and was so angry that he lost Knuckles. And like they're all kind of psychos and kind of like over competitive, but like you kind of have to be like that in order to be an athlete at that level. But also like even though they're competitive, they all still cared about each other a lot. So like the camaraderie, competitiveness really rang true to me. And I remember talking to my friend who played college baseball. He played college baseball at MIT, so he's, you know, wicked smart. He also commented on the competitiveness of these guys and how like that was like so true to his experience as a college athlete. Grizz, any bit of specificity jump out to you that you liked?
That did jump out to me was the time and place that this was set. This is a college town that this is, you know, taking place in. It's not a massive metropolitan area by any means.
Right.
So I felt like that was very authentic. The way their houses were kind of off on their own, and then there were parties at other houses that were way off on their own, because that's not what the city was originally built for. But it's also not a massive metropolitan area. So that was really cool. And also how
at most like a small main street with like restaurants and bars and stuff that they eat at. Like that's a very college town aesthetic.
And they had 3 bars. Right?
Yeah.
Now, like obviously, you know, where we went to school, there were more than 3 bars in town.
Not much more,
but not
not much more though.
But not that much more. Like, but and they all fit a niche, right? You had your country bar, you had your disco bar in this movie, and then you had where the punks hung out, and which I think is also another example of great specificity for this time period that they're taking place, because this is a time where music is changing significantly, and there's the disco is the more mainstream, and the counterculture coming
disco
in.
Punk, yeah.
And this is the height of that of them contradicting each other. And I did
put a pin in that. Yeah, put a pin in that. We're gonna come back to that later. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what I know. That's what stood out to me.
Yeah. Hugo, anything for you? Any bits of specificity?
I was going to say the same thing about the music specifically, but it's more kind of like, it's very hard to explain for me. Like the way these people act is so specific to their age, in a way that sometimes movies don't completely nail. Like you can tell that Jake specifically acts very differently, like depending who he's with.
Oh yeah,
and I like that because it's something that you do in your early 20s because you want to kind of fit in with different groups of people. You're not completely sure maybe of your own identity, your own interests and stuff, and the way he's different, even in this short span of 3 days, depending on the situation he's in, I thought was very, very cool, very interesting. Like, he's always open to, like, kind of mingling with everyone, which is very similar to Dazed and Confused as well, because I think the main point of Dazed and Confused was kind of like this central character who kind of fits in with everyone, but doesn't completely fit in with all of them, and he's very much the same, and I like that. But yeah, for the specificity specifically, which is a weird thing to say, is I was going to say the music as well, because I found the idea of going to the different bar. Okay, now we're country for this now, and now we're punks for
this
night.
This. He says we're punks for a night.
And then we're going to be theater kids next night. We need to wear a weird hat or something. That was very cool.
Which is so college.
Yeah,
and that's why I put a pin in it, and we're going to talk about it later. But like, this is a world of possibilities. Mm-hmm. You can be anybody. You know, it's the first week of college. Class haven't started yet. No one knows you here, so you can kind of choose what kind of person you want to be, and you have the freedom to do that, whether it's country, disco, punk, baseball, and theater, etc.
Jake not only says, "Oh, we're punks for a night," he also says, "This is cool. This is kind of making me question my own identity," and which I thought was cool, because you're early 20s, you kind of try stuff.
Yeah. Which brings me back to my last bit of specificity. Speaking of the theater kids, so Zoe Deutsch plays Beverly, and she is a freshman theater major. And Grizz, I'm assuming you hung out with some theater people in your time, being in Glee Club, etc. And like the way that Beverly talks, I recognize so much. Like, she's got kind of a sing-songy voice, and like she kind of like
voice, yeah.
It's like it's hard to really like describe what it is, but it's exactly how theater kids talk. How like it? I guess the best way to say it is it's kind of a sing-songy voice, and like, I don't know, just the fact that they nailed that so well. I'm like, yeah, I know who this person is, and I've met this person, and that's so nice. That's so great. Okay, so I mentioned that Linklater's great about specificity, so now I want to talk about Linklater in general. We kind of already talked about him a good bit, kind of in the what have we been watching kind of thing, but I just wanted to real quickly breeze through what movies have you seen. And what do you think of them? So, Hugo, real quick, what Linklater movies have you seen?
I've seen the Before trilogy. Obviously, we were talking about them before. Love all three, like, to death, for very different reasons and for very similar reasons at the same time. I just think those are some of the most remarkable things that have been made in films in the last 30 years or something, because they're just so unique. There's nothing like them. I really enjoyed Dazed and Confused. I will say slightly more than this, just because, like, in some ways the high school experience of especially the summer after the last year of high school is more similar over here, because at that point you know all your friends in your hometown and you go around to parties and stuff, whereas college isn't really a thing. You kind of go to a city to go to university, but that college in the same way that it is in the US doesn't really happen, so it's less kind of relatable to me. And I also watched School of Rock, which, I don't know, it's one of those movies that I saw when I was 10 years old, and I thought it was awesome, and it kind of shaped the way that I was looking at, like, trying to, listen to old music, and
have you
I
seen
love
it recently?
Have
you seen it recently?
I don't think I've seen it in the last 5 years now.
You should. It's a perfect movie. It's so good.
Yeah, I remember it as
It's so
being
good. It
really
holds
good,
up
and I feel like I would
unbelievably
like it
well.
more if I watched it now, because I would relate to the teachers more now than before. I only related to the kids, and now I would have something more with that. But
That's
and
maybe top 5 best matching of a character and the person playing him.
Oh yeah, I was like,
Jack Black?
I was.
Yeah.
I remember being in middle school and just showing people the clip of Jack Black just begging Led Zeppelin to let them use "Immigrant Song" for the movie.
Immigrant Song, yeah.
His Led Zeppelin before that movie famously would not let anyone use their music at all. Like after that, they kind of cooled on that a bit. Their songs have been used for commercials and movies and for Thor, but that was the movie that unlocked it. And I remember just going around showing people, "Oh, have you seen this clip of Jack Black asking Led Zeppelin? It's so great. You have to watch this movie." And I love that. But I also watched A Scanner Darkly, which is kind of a more, I'm sure, kind of more.
But you didn't watch that for Richard Linklater. You watched that for someone else, right?
No, I was going through like lists of like cyberpunk movies, and I happened upon this movie directed by Linklater, which I watched this after seeing the Before trilogy and starring Keanu Reeves, and I was like, oh great, this is perfect for me.
That's why I assumed you were watching. It was part of some Keanu rewatch.
No, it wasn't. No, but strange film. I don't think I loved it, because I think I wanted it to be more sci-fi than it is, and it kind of is and it isn't, and it's the only Linklater movie that I felt was a bit meandering, because it, compared to the other ones, it felt like at the beginning there was a very specific point, and then it does the Linklater thing where it's more of a hangout movie, so it didn't really gel for me. But it was interesting, and I also think it's weirdly one of Keanu's best, like, just dramatic performances. He's really weird and good in that one. So yeah, this is a movie that I've seen. I haven't seen Boyhood, but I really want to. It's just 3 hours long. Yeah, I need to see that at this point, because I've seen everything else he's made almost. At least the major ones.
For me, that's probably top 5 or 10 most important movies like that had an effect on me when I saw it. It's hard to really put into words what it meant to me. Grizz, more quickly than Hugo, what movies have you seen from Linklater?
Before trilogy: Days of Confused, Boyhood, School of Rock, Apollo 10.5. We've talked about all of them already. Good. I enjoy them all.
I've seen the Before trilogy, love it. I've seen Days Confused. I don't have much of a relationship to that movie. I've only seen it once or twice. Don't really have like a working knowledge of it. Like I have a working knowledge of this. Like this is my Days Confused, basically. School of Rock, perfect movie. Boyhood, could not put into words what it means to me. Apollo 10.5, very good. I should probably seek out more of his stuff, like given what Boyhood meant to me and what the Before trilogy means to me, and how much I love this movie. But I just kind of haven't. Like he does kind of have his highs and lows, Linklater.
Mm-hmm. After I watched this movie, Everybody Wants Some, I kind of realized, you know what? I think I just really love Richard Linklater, because like
I do too.
Again, almost all of the Before trilogies, I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and some people will have it higher, I'm sure, than I. But that's, and then I started thinking, I was like, I think basically every Richard Linklater movie I've seen has gotten at least 4 out of 5 stars. This guy is just, I love this director.
Well, he does have like some movies that I won't call them paycheck movies because that's disrespectful, but I mean like there are movies that like are very, very him. Days Confused, the Before trilogy, Boyhood, this being very, very Richard Linklater-y, which we'll talk about in a second. Then there are other movies like Where'd You Go, Bernadette, or Fast Food Nation, or even Bad News Bears to an extent, the remake. Like that, like I'm not saying he's taking them for a paycheck, but like they are more like studio movies that he's a hired gun for rather than like him bringing, I'm not saying he didn't bring his personal stuff to that, but like I don't think of Where'd You Go, Bernadette when I think of Richard Linklater movies, for example. Mm-hmm. So I don't like feel much of an inclination to seek those out, but like the stuff that's like really him, like I should see Scanner Darkly, I should see Waking Life, and I haven't yet. I should see all those because like you said, like I really, really like everything that he does. So I mentioned the Linklater-esque movie, so like Hugo, what do you see, like what is what's the overarching things in his movies or in his style?
Yeah, I think we talked about that idea of making you fall in love with relationships, which is something that he does so well. I think the relationships that he had, not just like romantic relationships, but just relationships between characters in his movies are kind of unmatched because they feel very natural. Like, even if they develop over 3 days or something, it does kind of feel like Jake gets to know these people in the same way that you would in college, that you would instantly kind of become like buds and go out and drink and kind of have a working relationship already over 3 days, which you wouldn't if you were older, maybe. And another thing is, like, he writes very wordy, like complex dialogue that sometimes has long monologues, but the way he directs and the way he picks his actors, he makes it feel very natural. We were talking about what's his name?
Glenn
Sorry,
Powell.
the Glenn Powell. I think he's a perfect Linklater actor because
I love
he's
him in this
able
so much. Like,
because
he's so good. Sorry.
he's able to say so many things so quickly, but it doesn't feel like he's reading a script at all. Like, it feels like that character talks that way, and I think it's very hard for an actor to be very wordy and not feel unnatural or a little kind of. It doesn't feel like they're acting at all. It really feels like the character in his movies are really characters, and they're kind of just like that. They kind of speak like that, which is not completely natural, but it feels real in the context of the movie.
Even when the dialogue is a little bit stilted, it still feels natural.
Yeah,
like,
it
paradoxically.
does.
I don't really know how to explain it.
In Before Sunrise, they're just... The first time you meet a girl and you spend a day with her, you're not going to be talking about philosophy all day, right? But it feels completely normal and real in the context of the movie.
Yes.
Like, there's something, like, if you think about it rationally, that dialogue is you might even think, oh, this is overwritten, but it's not, because he makes it work. And I don't really know what it is, but it does work.
For me, the
Grizz.
writing is it reminds me of the same way I feel about Aaron Sorkin's writing, where I know it's not how people actually talk, but it feels right in the world that's being presented to us. And so I even though, like, I oftentimes, you've heard me say it a bunch of times in our episodes, that I don't like when movies get overly philosophical for no reason. But it kind of works in these movies and in the Before trilogy as well. In Everybody Wants Them, though, it really works because who hasn't been to a party where some college kid was waxing poetic about their personal philosophies? It happens all the time. So it really does fit the world perfectly.
Yeah, the other small thing that I want to mention is, like, we think about his movies very much being dialogue driven and relationship driven and that kind of thing, but I think he's sneakily really interesting as a filmmaker, just as a visual filmmaker. I think the way he moves the camera, the way he kind of follows his characters, and it's never uninteresting to look at his movies, despite the fact that they're very simple setups. Like, it's just two people walking down the streets or people having a chat in a bus, but the way he puts it on the camera and the way he doesn't cut or the way that he does cut is always visually stimulating, which is not always true for films that are largely, like, if you take another director that came up at the same time, like Kevin Smith, his early movies that Clerks is a movie that I really enjoy. Clerks is a movie where the camera is still and the characters are talking, and Linklater just doesn't do that. It's very dialogue driven, but it's always interesting visually as well.
Yeah. Grizz.
The one thing I
Linklater
wanted
stuff.
to touch on for this overarching things you could say about Linklater's movies and his style is about what they're about. In large part, it's aspirational stories of youth. So you see that in movies like School of Rock, where it's about kids coming into their own and deciding who they want to be and being proud of who they are. You see that in in Before Sunrise. You see they're youthful, they're young. This is a new relationship. The future is all potential. So you see that in that, and then of course you see that in this movie, because again, that this is college. This college is the time where your potential is entirely up to you, and it's whatever you want it to be. But there's also the nostalgia, and I think that you can definitely feel that with Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some, and even like School of
Boyhood
Rock
even.
and Boyhood and Apollo 10.5. You can tell that Richard Linklater has very strong and powerful memories from his childhood and his in his youthful days And it's not that he's a terribly old man now, for that matter. It's just that he does have very vivid recollection of the world that he was in at those times, and he presents them very well on film. Yes, Josh.
I was going to mention this during the specificity section. I forgot, but you just brought it up. There's an extra on the Blu-ray for Everybody Wants Some. It's a little, like, 3 or 4 minute short called Wikipedia. And apparently on set, they called Richard Linklater Wikipedia because he just knew... He has, like, an encyclopedic knowledge of every detail of what life was like in August of 1980, to the point that, like, they have a period car on set, and he'd be like, well, that's actually 78, not an 80, so then we need to beat it up a little bit more, because that's been on the road for a little while. Or, like, a song will play and be like, well, that song was actually charted in 79, so, like, they'd probably be sick of it at that point. And, like, he'd be telling the guys, like, okay, no high fives weren't a thing yet, or, hugs weren't a thing yet, so, like, you gotta do, this and that, and, like, he just corrected every tiny little nuance of what life was like in August of 1980, just, like, knew that offhand. So, like, this is semi-autobiographical, but he does have, like, quite a memory of, like, what his life was like, and he just puts that on screen, and it really works, I think.
And the last thing that I think is an overarching theme of his is his movies I shouldn't say all, in large part, are slice-of-life movies. You get a segment of time, and you get to see and feel what the world was like at that brief moment. So it's whether it be one day in Days Confused, a couple of days, or a week rather, in this movie leading up to the start of classes. It's all, or in the Before trilogy, it's just a span of 24
really
hours.
A few hours, even less.
Even less.
The second movie takes place in real time, basically. Yeah. The second movie takes place more or less in real time, which is
the second movie is like a few hours.
Yeah, it's so good.
And so it's very brief segments, but you're getting
in Boyhood too. Boyhood is just like here's a day when he's 6 years old. Here's a day when he's 10. Here's a day when he's 12.
And it gives you kind of a cool lens to look at these characters. It's almost like going to a zoo. You're getting to look through the glass at what their existence is at this moment, and then you as the viewer, you leave. But you also know, especially with the Before trilogy, that you can come back and you're going to get to look at another segment of their life, and you kind of digest what's changed. It's really cool, and it's, like I said before, it's something I wish a lot more directors would attempt to do, is tell stories that span greater periods of time, because people always get hung up. Oh, well, who are they going to cast as so and so? Because he's older now. If they're doing another movie, like, no, just use the same actor. He's old now. Use that, playing out. I have such an appreciation for Linklater's approach, knowing I want to do this with these movies, so I'm going to start now, and these are my guys, and I'm going to use them forever. I just love that.
And also, he's certainly really able to get you to know these people in the small segments of their lives that you're privy to. You kind of get a sense of who they are, despite the fact that you're only with them for, a day, 3 days, or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think he's a director who's really obsessed with time in a way that few directors are, that I think I really respond to that in his movies. I mean, that's obvious. That's the text of Boyhood, and that's the text of the Before trilogy, but
it's in this one as well. Like, it's 3 days before class starts. Like, that's almost a timer that you get to the end of the movie. Put a
very brief pin in that. I'll come right back to that in like 1 second. Just let me go through my Linklater hallmarks. Sure. And so for me, he is the quintessential Gen X filmmaker in that he's kind of like got like these characters and movies themselves that are kind of a little aimless and like kind of just like talk a lot of bullshit, and they have like this faux philosophical dialogue, but then like it kind of it's before it becomes grating, it kind of becomes profound. It kind of walks the line of like annoying and profound, and usually tips for me into the profound direction. Which is why my last segment I want to talk about any profundity you see in this movie. And so let me ask a leading question based on what Hugo's just talking about. Why do you think that clock is there? Well, let me before say, the movie opens with Jake pulling up to the baseball house on Thursday before classes start, and a title card comes up that says Thursday, August, whatever, 1980. Classes begin in 3 days and 20 hours. And then like every morning of this movie, it puts that title card up again and tells you, it counts down the days and hours until classes start. Hugo, why do you think the movie does that?
I think it's signposting, which I think is another thing that is cool that he does. Like, he kind of sets your expectations for what the movie is going to be. and you're kind of waiting for when are we going to get the next title card, and then in the final day, oh wait, this is going on longer. Now it's the morning.
It's building to something.
And then you get to it, and it's like, oh, 6 a.m. class starts in 3 hours, and that's where the movie ends. Kind of you're expecting the final thing to be class starting, and it.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of setting it before class is very much to give these characters, like, these are the 3 days where they are completely detached from their previous lives and kind of the life that they're going to have in college. They haven't started university yet, but they're completely free to do whatever they want, be whoever they are, engage in whatever relationships they want to engage. And there's something so interesting about telling just these 3 specific days. And you can tell that it almost feels like he wants to relive the fact that he had this moment of complete freedom where he could just kind of be whatever he wanted. And after that, there's more structure to life. So I think that's why it's so interesting.
You're basically saying what I have, which is like it serves a narrative function of orienting you in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So like you know where we are and where we're headed. Basically kind of promises you this is going to last until that set point. Once the timer goes off, then the movie's over, basically. But also like you just alluded, like it's kind of underscoring the fleetingness of this good time. Like this is a 3-day weekend where they have no responsibilities and nothing holding them down, and they can do whatever they want, but this isn't going to last. Like the responsibilities of college are just over the horizon, and just over that, the next horizon is the responsibility of life after college and adulthood and the next 40 years before you retire. But that's not quite here yet. We got 3 days before the real world begins, and we have 3 days to just have a good time and be alive and get to know each other and get drunk and have sex, and it's great. But like the stopwatch on it really does underscore the fact that this is a temporary thing. This is a fun thing, but it's not going to last forever. Grizz, you got anything to add on the clock?
Nothing more on the clock. No.
Okay. Any profound stuff in this movie that I got a longer spiel about the profundity and the time and everything, but anything you got about the profoundness?
Just kind of one thing that stood out to me was when Wyatt Russell exits the film, Willoughby's exit of the movie.
Yes,
and I know you want to
for
talk about
sure.
this as well.
Yes.
He leaves and he says, "We're here for a good time, not a long time." And I think that ties in very well, actually, with the ticking clock, because it is again underscoring how fleeting this is, and that when we find out later that Willoughby is actually a 30-year-old man, and he's just been going from school to school as long as he can, trying to keep playing baseball because he doesn't want to let go of this fleeting moment. So it's interesting that when we talk about how much nostalgia Linklater has, and then you have a character like this that is literally holding on to a time that has since passed him by. And so, I don't know, there's something profound about that.
Can I do my long spiel?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I've seen this movie a number of times now, probably 5-6 times something. So like I kind of have digested it, and I kind of think I get what Linklater's going for here. And so there's like a few key scenes I want to point to make this larger point. First scene is it's about halfway through the movie when like Jake and Plum and Finn are just kind of walking along campus, and then Jake runs into a friend he used to play baseball with in high school, the punk kid. But right before Jake finds his old friend Justin, Plum, the catcher, says something along the lines of like, "What are all these people doing here? Like, I know why I'm here. I'm here to play baseball. But what are these guys doing here?" And then he says something along the lines of like, they're just going to be some guy doing some job, is what he says about the other people at college who aren't there to play baseball. And they also say somewhere in that conversation, like, can you imagine living your life when there's not even a possibility that you would make the major leagues? Which I thought was very interesting. And so that's one scene that I want to put a pin in. And then the scene that we already alluded to where Jake talks to Finn about how we're punks for a night, how last night we were disco guys, then we were country guys, now we're punk guys. I'm having an identity crisis. Then I want to also talk about Willoughby's exit. So the scene where Willoughby gets caught and they realize he's a 30-year-old man who's trying to hold on to a time gone by. And then I also want to mention Jake's last scene when he's on the river with Beverly, right before, like 3 hours before classes start. He talks about the essay he wrote to get him into college and how he compared himself to Sisyphus and how he finds meaning in baseball the same way that Sisyphus found meaning in pushing the rock up the hill. And then the last scene in the movie is Jake in class, where his professor writes, "Frontiers are what was it? Frontiers are where you find them, or frontiers are where you encounter them."
Yes,
I don't remember the exact line.
Yeah,
frontiers are where you encounter
either
them,
frontiers or borders, and where you found them.
It's
or
frontiers.
something, yeah.
It was Frontiers. It was definitely Frontiers.
Yes. So, what I want to, I think the running theme through all these is that, as I mentioned, the ticking clock kind of implies that this is a fleeting moment before life really begins, whether that be your college classes or your adult life after college. Like, this is a fleeting time before responsibilities hit you yet, but, it's a good time that's not going to last forever. But it's also, as we also alluded earlier, college is a time of possibility. Jake has not only his whole college experience ahead of him, but his whole life ahead of him. And here in this place, he can be anybody because no one knows him. He can be a disco guy. He can be a cowboy. He can be a punk. He can embrace his weirdness, like Willoughby says during their pool game or something like that. And even like the major leagues are still a possibility, even if they really aren't. Like, it's interesting. Again, I played baseball in high school, and like no one I played ball with got anywhere beyond, I think, like they a few guys played on the college teams, but no one made the majors. But like, if you're 17 and you're still playing baseball, a small part of you still believes, well, there's like a possibility, even though it's not really going to happen. Like, I mean, at least I'm still playing, and so when those guys say like, I can't imagine living my life when there's no possible way I'd ever be in the major leagues, none of those guys are going to be in the major leagues. But like the fact that they're still playing, they like consider themselves better than these other people at college who will just grow up to be some guy working some job, So like, it's a world of possibility, even though that possibility is probably gone, but it's still, kind of there. And Charlie Willoughby is holding on to all this. Like, that's why he's conning these schools, so he can like live that life of possibility. Even though he's 30 and his life of responsibility should have already started, he doesn't want to acknowledge that. So he's trying to perpetually stay in this. He's ignoring the ticking clock, and he's trying to perpetually stay in this weekend before his life really began, when that world of possibility was still available to him. Because, really, the darker side of this movie is that life is a series of closing doors, where like as you're growing up, like you have all these possibilities of who you can be and what you can be, and then slowly those doors close, and then eventually you're just living the life that you're going to live, which is a sobering realization, and something that these characters in this movie are trying to fight off, basically. But the doors haven't closed for Jake yet. Someday he will just be some guy with some job, but not yet. Not as long as there's still time on that clock that keeps coming up in the bottom right corner of the screen. But, coming back to the scene of him and Beverly and the conversation about Sisyphus, like, even once that timer runs out, the point of that conversation with Beverly is that, meaning is what we assign. I think that's a line Beverly says,
Yeah.
Some guy with some job is Sisyphus. Sisyphus is some guy with some job. And if he can find meaning in that and find passion in that, then there's nothing wrong with being some guy with some job if you can find your own meaning, It's
almost like he's saying this is and I think he kind of hints at it as well. He says like, this is baseball now for me, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it has to be baseball. Like, it could be something else as well.
Baseball's what he's finding meaning in right now.
Yeah.
And like, him and his teammates scoff at the idea of there ever being anything in their lives that's meaningful to them besides baseball, but there will be.
There will be.
Yeah, sure. I believe there will be. And that's the last scene is, we make our own meaning and we set our own limitations. Frontiers are where you find them. So like, even if Jake does not play Major League Baseball, which he will not, he can still, like, he's setting up a frontier for himself where, like, after college, my life is over because I'm some guy with some job. That's the end of the road for me. But frontiers are where you find them. You can find new passion in something else, and then the world is your oyster again. The world is open to possibilities again. And I find that all very beautiful.
Yep.
And very profound.
Yep.
And, you kind of have to, like, tangle with a few things to get to dig just below the surface to find these things, but, like, I think that's all pretty great. I think that's great stuff. Yes, I agree.
There's I think another common thing about his work is that it's on the surface. On the surface, it's like, oh, we're hanging out with these characters, and it's cool and it's fun and uplifting and we're having a good time. But there's always like sort of this underlying kind of melancholia and kind of. It's almost as he's aware that this feeling of nostalgia and happiness is fleeting, and it doesn't go on forever, and it's just on the surface, and there's more complex stuff underneath. And you kind of have this feeling like if he did sequels to all his movies, they would end up like Before Midnight, where at some point you kind of have to get out of that sort of beautiful imaginary reality where, you know, you're falling in love or you're playing baseball in college or whatever it is.
Reality sets in eventually.
Yeah, and it's an underlying thing in his work, and I think this one does it as well. Like, there are moments of sort of reflection, even though maybe the characters are not necessarily doing it because they're just having fun, but you get it through them because maybe you're seeing it from a different point of view. And yeah, it's interesting that when you talked about before full philosophical in the dialogue, it's like the films are almost at their deepest when they're not talking philosophically. It's more like the implication of what is actually happening in the movie, and the sillier parts sometimes can be more profound than the actual parts where they're kind of 20-year-olds talking about philosophy and life. So yeah, good movie.
I don't think it's going to get any better than that. So let's rank it.
Yeah, I was gonna go to final thoughts. So anybody have any final thoughts before we rank, or are we just gonna rank the thing?
I mean, it's a great movie. I'm so happy that you gave us this assignment, Josh, because I probably would have missed this.
Everybody else seemed to.
I truly loved it. I can't wait to encourage more people to try it. Good.
I haven't put any thought into my ranking yet, so I'm kind of going off the cuff here. But I think I got it. Yeah, I think I'm. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's start with Grizz. Where do you want to put this?
All right. So I had to give this some thought, but ultimately I have decided, and I think this may surprise you guys. Maybe it won't. We'll find out. But I'm going to put it directly above The Thing on my list, which was number 24. I think. And so now this
it was number 24.
Yeah. So
indeed.
now Everybody Wants Some is my 24. I truly love this. The feeling, the emotions that this movie gave me. It's something special.
I'm glad. It just puts me in such a great mood too. That's not what you said, but it puts me in a great mood. So
I feel good. I felt good after having watched it.
Yes. So for Grizz, Wyatt Russell just beats out his dad, Kurt Russell, and Everybody Wants Some goes right above the
beautiful
thing.
symmetry is what I got there.
Yes. It's like a poem with rhymes. Hugo, what do you got?
The one thing we didn't mention was when we were talking about nostalgia, the movie literally begins. The first shot of the movie. I'm surprised you didn't mention this, Josh. But the first thing of the movie is it's kind of a late 70s, 80s car, and a cassette being put in a cassette player, and My Sharona plays. And I just think that's great.
Yes.
I was
So
like,
good.
oh,
Yes.
We're starting with this. We're in for a ride, and
Yes.
I loved it. I really enjoyed
It only
it.
gets better.
Yeah, and I have the movie pretty high on my list. I actually have it at my number 19, right below Scream and In Bruges,
You're
and
making
above
Josh so happy right now.
Another Round and Jackie Brown.
All right, yeah. So let me drag Hugo's.
For the listeners,
movie,
Josh is
number
just
19.
smiling because he's happy that we enjoyed this.
I'm always pumped that you guys enjoy my suggestions, because you don't always. Like, we all remember Sweeney Todd. No one likes Sweeney Todd. Except me. That's okay. Let's see. Where did I put this? Did I put this? Okay, I put this at the exact same spot Grizz did at 24. So for me, it's just below 127 Hours, Lawrence of Arabia, and Jackie Brown. And then I have Everybody Wants Some, just ahead of Shaun of the Dead, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and Rudy. So it beats out Rudy for the college experience movie, which is kind of messed up because Rudy was close to my college experience too.
It's literally our college,
so-
Josh.
Yes. So let's see. Doing
Josh
some
doesn't
math.
care about Notre Dame anymore. That's what I'm hearing.
Really,
That's-
he's moved
that's-
on. LA's
Get outta
changed,
here.
man.
Get out of here, you Italian menace, you. Let's see. So hold on. I'm sorting. I'm doing our new math, and I'm sorting. So that means Everybody Wants Some goes number 24. So right where Grizz and I put it. It goes
There you
number
go.
24, just below Citizen Kane and The Lighthouse, and then a really different movie, Everybody Wants Some, and then John Wick and Jackie Brown, just below Everybody Wants Some. So yeah, 24. Ooh, I did some math wrong somewhere. Okay, no, that's fine. So yeah, That's Everybody Wants Some. This is a good episode. I'm glad you guys like the movie. Like I said, I'm very excited whenever you guys like movies that I like, because I like liking things, and I like sharing things that I like.
And he likes liking
with
that other people like the things he likes.
Yes.
Speaking of...
So speaking of liking things, next week, I needed to confirm this, so I don't hold me to this, but I think next week we may have a guest, my friend Jack, from childhood. And Jack wanted to do the movie Wayne's World, which is a movie I have seen. That's maybe top 5 movies that I've seen the most in terms of viewings. I know it in my bones, my DNA, and I love it immensely. It's a big part of me. So whether it's next week or a future week, we're going to talk about Wayne's World with Jack. I hope it's next week because I love Wayne's World. But for now, let's say next week, Wayne's World.
Party time, excellent.
Party time, excellent, swing.
Is Wayne's World...
Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody.
I have not seen this, but I'm looking at... Is Wayne's World the one with Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yes.
It is indeed the one with Bohemian Rhapsody, yes.
There's already something
I believe the song charted 15 years after release because
of this movie.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yes. Which we will talk about. Yeah. I'm sure we will talk about it. We cannot talk about Wayne's World without talking about Bohemian Rhapsody, but that will be next week or some other time very soon. Hugo, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Hugo_Pinhai on Twitter. Is that my thing? I don't even remember.
Yep.
It is,
That's
yeah. And you can find me at Hugo Pinhai on Letterboxd. I recently just made a complete list that I will update right after the podcast of all the Film to Remembers ranked by us. So you can find that at RTF_pod, not RTF pod. It's a pin tweet. So if you want to check out the whole list, you can find it there.
Grizz, internet, go.
Just find me Good Game Grizz everywhere. Josh?
Okay. Good Game Grizz on Raya. Good Game Grizz on the Bank America app.
Okay, well,
Good
maybe
Game
not Good Game Grizz everywhere, but just search Grizz. I'm going to be one of them.
Good Game Grizz on OnlyFans.
Just DM every person named Grizz you find on every stream and every platform, and one of them might be Grizz. You're Grizz. You can find me on Twitter at @thesloopjoshb. You can find me on YouTube, Movies I Love and So Can You. Yeah, that's probably it. You can follow us on Twitter at RTF_pod and send mean DMs to everyone at a handle close to that isn't us, so they'll get off that handle and we can have it instead. And we got anything else? Are we closing up?
Nope, we got to close it up. That's it.
Okay. All right. Tuning in next week for Wayne's World, maybe.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.